I arrived just before sunset. The restaurant sat tucked beneath thick oaks, their limbs heavy with Spanish moss. They swayed like old hands, brushing against memory. The breeze carried a hint of salt. And something else, something I couldn't quite name. I checked my reflection in the glass door before walking in, fixed my hair, straightened the sleeves of my navy blouse. It was just dinner. That's what I told myself. But my stomach had a quiet tremor in it. My heels clicked on the tile, too loud. I spotted them right away. My parents at a round table near the window. They waved, smiled, but their eyes dropped too quickly, like the smile had been rehearsed. Just dinner, I whispered under my breath. Lie number one. There was a murmur of conversation, silverware against plates. I reached the table and paused. My eyes drifted, automatically, to the right of my father's chair. My seat. It had always been mine. But tonight, it wasn't. A young woman sat there, bright dress, bright smile, my brother's fiancée. Her hand rested on my father's arm like it had earned the right. No one looked up. I hovered, unsure. Then a waitress appeared behind me, almost apologetic. She carried a chair and placed it at the far end of the table. No one said anything. My mother gave a slight wave toward the chair. "Just a small mix-up," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. I nodded, quietly. Sat. Adjusted my spine straight. My fingers rested in my lap. I would not make this awkward for them. I'd learned to swallow awkward years ago. Plates were passed, wine poured, laughter trickled from one side of the table like I wasn't sitting there. Then came the envelopes. My father reached into his coat and pulled out cream-colored invitations, formal, heavy stock, gold embossed. "Family-only dinner next month," he said. "Private venue." He handed one to each of us. Mine came last. I turned it over, looked at the front. No name. Every envelope had a name in calligraphy, even my nephew's. Mine was blank. "Probably a printer mistake," I said, voice light. No one answered. My niece leaned over and chirped, "Maybe it was for someone else?" A burst of giggles followed. Her, the fiancé, even my brother. My mom looked down. My father sipped his wine like he hadn't heard. A crack opened inside me. Small, sharp. I took a long sip of water, let it sit in my mouth, swallowed carefully. I wouldn't give them the performance they expected. I wouldn't let them see me bleed. As the table leaned into stories about renovations, kids, new vacation plans, I drifted into memory. One birthday, I waited all day by the phone. Another year, I canceled an interview, a real shot, to babysit last minute when the nanny quit. I was the one who slept in the hospital chair when Dad had bypass surgery. Everyone else came for 10 minutes and left. I folded my napkin, slowly, into a small leaf. I'd done that before. Quiet hands, steady fingers, a habit no one noticed, but it kept me anchored, a piece of me untouched. I smiled. I'd learned to craft silence into armor. But tonight, something shifted. I wasn't here to be included. I saw that now. I wasn't overlooked. I was being erased. Still, I smiled. Not for them. For me. Because this time, I wouldn't vanish. I'd sit through every course, every laugh that didn't include me, every look that passed over my shoulder like I wasn't there. I didn't owe them peace anymore. I owed myself clarity. So I stayed. Not to fit in, but to witness. Something underneath this celebration felt off. Calculated. I didn't know what yet, but I'd be here when it cracked open. I wasn't leaving first this time. It had been just 20 minutes since I sat at the far end of that long, too bright table. The laughter hadn't faded. It just curled around me like steam, warm and unwelcome. Their voices danced above the plates, circling, weaving, skipping past where I sat. I nodded when expected, smiled on cue, but every word they tossed never touched me. I was physically present, emotionally airbrushed out. "Remember when she used to keep the kids quiet for hours? You were like a magician with snacks and cartoons," someone chuckled from across the table. My brother didn't even look at me. My sister-in-law laughed as if it were just a sweet anecdote, not a dismissive blow. Then she introduced me to her friend seated beside her. This is the one who helps with the kids, like every time we're in a pinch, she's there. Just the help, no mention of my work, my business, the life I've built outside their needs. Not even a passing, she's their aunt. Just the one who helps. No one corrected her. They weren't trying to hurt me. That's the worst part. They just didn't see me anymore. A screen lit up from the other side of the table. My nephew, always eager to show off his gadgets, launched a slideshow on his tablet. "Family trip rewind," he shouted, flipping the screen for all to see. I leaned forward. Maybe this would be something. A shared laugh, a remembered moment. The photos flicked by. Sunlit beaches, crowded breakfast tables, backyard barbecues, familiar scenes, but I wasn't in them. Not once. In one picture, I remembered standing beside my mother, holding a watermelon wedge. I saw the watermelon, but where I should have been, there was just grass, cropped clean. Another had a glimpse of my elbow at the edge of the frame. That was it, my elbow. They'd photoshopped me out. My breath caught. I said nothing. No one noticed, or maybe they did, and that silence was the decision. I didn't even know they'd had someone edit them. Or maybe they did it themselves. I didn't ask. I wouldn't. I felt like a coffee stain on their white tablecloth. I should have laughed or said something biting. But all I did was look back down at my glass, tilted it, watched the light bend inside the water. A few years ago, I flew across the country in a snowstorm, dragging 3 suitcases filled with toys and clothes so their kids wouldn't miss Christmas. I organized every night's board games. I made hot cocoa with cinnamon because the youngest said it made her feel fancy. None of that was remembered. Or maybe it was. They just didn't care to show it. I looked across the table at my father. He wasn't paying attention, just twirling the stem of his wine glass like it held the answer to something he'd never dare ask. Something inside me finally settled. This was not about me being difficult, or sensitive, or dramatic. This was about being erased. I waited until the next toast. My brother lifted his glass to something. Family who sticks together, I think. I raised mine, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, "To the ones who are always there, even when we don't notice them." The table froze. Then, like someone hit a laugh track, they chuckled nervously. My mother's smile was too tight. My father looked up, a slight crease between his eyes. No one asked what I meant. They didn't want to know. I let the moment sit, let it hang there like the smell of burnt toast. No one reached for it. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. Under the table, my hands were trembling, not from weakness, from holding it in too long. But my smile? Steady. This wasn't dinner anymore. It was a record. I was watching, documenting, filing every wound, every omission, every sliver of ice under their warmth. I wasn't going to plead for place at their table again. I wasn't going to beg for inclusion like a child tugging at a parent's sleeve. I folded the napkin in front of me, not into the usual leaf, not careful, not precise, just a crumple, a mark. I left it like that. I stood up from the table, murmured something about needing the restroom. No one looked twice. No one paused their laughter. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. The hallway was quiet, a stark contrast to the noise behind me. Dim lighting, fake plants, and paintings that looked mass-produced. I leaned against the wall, then slid down onto a small bench. The cool wood pressed through my dress. I pulled out my phone, not to scroll, just to hold something, anything. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't need a break to cry. I needed distance, the kind that doesn't show on your face but settles somewhere in the bones. I sat there and thought, how did I end up the guest in a family I built around me? The bench creaked as someone had sat here before, probably countless others escaping in their own way. A wave of voices floated down the hallway from the dining room, laughing, glass clinking, someone dragging out a punchline. I didn't miss it. Not in the way people mean. I missed being part of something real. A sudden buzz next to me broke the stillness. My niece had left her phone. It lit up. At first, I looked away, thinking to respect her space. But then the screen stayed on longer than usual. A notification banner popped up. Group chat. Just us. Family thread. The message preview showed a joke about someone's cooking, a plan for Grandma's birthday. A reminder for brunch next Saturday. Names I recognized filled the bubble chain. My sister, my brother, even the cousins. Mine wasn't there. I wasn't part of it. That thread had history. It wasn't new. The photos they'd shared, the in-jokes. It wasn't a casual chat. It was where the real family lived. My niece returned seconds later, startled to find her phone glowing in my peripheral. I didn't pick it up, didn't say a word about it. Instead, I looked at her and asked gently, "Hey, what's just us?" Her body tensed before her lips moved. "Oh, just silly stuff. Memes, mostly," she said, with a laugh that felt stapled on. I didn't argue. I nodded like it didn't matter, like my stomach hadn't just dropped. When she slipped back into the dining room, I didn't follow. I walked the long way around the building, let the cool air hit my face. I found myself standing at the edge of the parking lot, looking at the soft yellow glow spilling from the restaurant's windows. Shadows moved inside, my family, my history, laughing around a table I wasn't really at. I remembered something my therapist once said: rejection isn't always loud, sometimes it's perfectly organized. I wasn't banished, I was omitted. That sting didn't scream, it whispered. I headed back toward the front entrance, and as I passed by the windows again, I heard my brother's voice. "Well, last month's brunch was smoother, at least." I paused. "What brunch?" I asked as I stepped in, pretending not to let the cold air follow me. He looked startled. "Oh, just a quick thing, nothing big," he said, waving it off. I looked around. No one corrected him. No one invited me in. Mom was already changing the subject, asking about someone's new haircut. But I saw it, the slip, the nervous glance between my siblings. They'd been doing this for a while, without me. I nodded, sat down, picked up my glass of water, and drank slowly. Let them talk. Let them plan the next lunch, the next joke, the next thing I'd never be part of. I stayed quiet, watching them, intently now. Not with pain, but with clarity. This wasn't new. This wasn't surprising. What was new was me. I'd stopped trying to get in the room, stopped knocking on a door that clearly wasn't built for me. I stayed seated because I wanted to see all of it, not for revenge, not for drama, for truth. I didn't storm out, didn't cry. I just let the silence wrap around me like armor. Sat there while they moved past me like I was a chair at the wrong table. For the first time, I wondered if maybe I was better off outside the circle, but I stayed because sometimes watching closely is how you learn who people really are. We returned to the table, everyone a little quieter now, as if the wine had settled and the weight of the evening started to show. Forks scraped gently, glasses clinked with softer laughter. They talked weddings, vacations, and plans that no one bothered to ask if I was part of. My brother mentioned errands after brunch tomorrow, another reminder that they had built a rhythm I was never invited into. I tore small pieces of bread and placed them on the edge of my plate. I didn't eat them. I listened. Not to be nosy, not to catch anyone, just to understand. To hear who they really were when they didn't think I mattered enough to be careful. I excused myself again, not because I needed the restroom, but because I needed the quiet. The hallway was dim, same ferns, same sterile art. As I rounded the corner, something slipped out of someone's jacket on a chair just outside the restroom. A white security envelope. It hit the floor, silent as dust. I paused. I didn't pick it up, not right away. I crouched to tie my shoe, took a glance. The envelope had been torn slightly. Inside, paper, typed, clean fonts, legal formatting. One page, my name printed clearly. The next, my name missing. Something shifted in my gut. A snap, not a break. I took out my phone, clicked the camera, and captured it. One flashless photo. Then I slipped the envelope onto the seat, right where it had fallen. Back at the table, Lorelai glanced toward me and then at the chair outside. Her fingers twitched. She excused herself 2 minutes later. Too fast to be nothing. I watched her walk past me, eyes flickering with calculation. My stomach turned. "What's this envelope?" I asked, casually enough for anyone listening to believe I didn't care much. Lorelai blinked. What envelope? The one you just picked up. Oh, that. I thought it was Dad's. My father leaned in, frowning. Was it mine? She laughed, that high, tight laugh she always used when she wasn't ready for the truth. Maybe I grabbed it by mistake. It landed with a thud. No one said another word. No one offered clarity. That silence was all I needed. They knew something, and they'd been keeping it from me. Minutes passed. My phone buzzed under the table. Cress. Check your email. I did. The subject line read, Kincaid Family Estate Amendment. I clicked. My breath caught. It was a new draft of the will. Different formatting, new date, different allocations. My name, gone. Gone from the assets. Gone from the medical decisions. Gone from everything. In its place, new names. Lorelei's. My brother's. Even my cousin's youngest child had a clause. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I closed the email. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just sat with it, because this wasn't just money. It wasn't paperwork. It was a signal. A declaration. I was no longer seen as one of them. When I returned, I didn't mention anything, didn't throw the phone on the table, didn't ask who changed what or when. I just pulled out my own phone, opened the camera, and looked at the photo of the envelope. Evidence. Not for court, but for memory, for clarity, for truth. My mother looked at me, eyes searching, unsure. I met them. I didn't blink. And then, like a reflex she couldn't stop, she looked away. That was the answer. Not in words, not in excuses. In that single, subtle act. I folded my hands in my lap, jaw clenched behind a calm smile. They weren't going to push me out loud. They were going to quietly erase me, step by step, assuming I'd be too polite to notice. But I noticed, and I wouldn't forget. The drive home was quiet. I sat behind the wheel with both parents in the back seat like passengers in a cab they didn't know how to tip. No one said much. The radio played something soft, a song I used to hum along to when things still felt like they meant something. Dad tapped his fingers lightly on the door panel, humming off key. I looked at him in the rearview mirror and caught myself thinking, do you know what you've let them do? Or are you part of it now, too? Mom broke the silence with something that could have been harmless if it weren't so sharp under the surface. You've always been so helpful. Helpful. That word. Not devoted. Not reliable. Not loyal. Not even caring. Just helpful. Like I was a neighbor who dropped off soup, not someone who gave up years of her life for their appointments, their prescriptions, their panic calls at 2 a.m. I didn't answer her. I just nodded. The kind of nod that says, I'm registering this. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had gone from navy to black. I turned off the engine but left the radio playing. They didn't move. Maybe they knew I needed a second. Or maybe they didn't care. I opened my phone. The email from Cress still sat there, unopened. It stared back at me like it was waiting for the right moment to ruin the rest of my night. I tapped it. The subject line was dry. Durable power of attorney, termination. I clicked the PDF. My name, once listed as the primary contact for all decisions, had been removed. No explanation, no thank you, no notice. Just a new name, Lorelei Mason. There it was, formal, legal, final. I stared at the document, didn't even scroll, just let that one sentence sit on my screen like a cold slap. I had given up job interviews to take care of my parents, stayed home when others left, argued with insurance reps, filled prescriptions, drove them to every checkup, filed every form. I was the one who remembered which medication Dad couldn't take with grapefruit, but apparently I was just helpful. And now I wasn't even that. I closed the file, then opened my scanned folder. Old receipts, medical notes, printouts from the state elder care office. Everything I kept for accuracy, for my sanity. In those years, no one else wanted the responsibility. They were rewriting the story, twisting it into something easier to forget. I could hear it in my head already. Oh, she just helped out a bit. She was never the legal caregiver. I whispered, if I vanish, they'll say I was never here. That fear. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern. Dad once fell in the middle of winter, slipped on the back porch. I sat up with him for 3 nights straight, icing his hip, logging his meds, monitoring the swelling. Mom was sick. Lorelei was too busy. No one thanked me. No one needed to. I didn't do it for that. But I still remember the voicemail Dad left me weeks later. "Thank you, baby. I don't know what we'd do without you." Apparently, they figured it out. I scrolled up to that voicemail again, played it, once. Then I stared out the windshield. My parents finally opened their doors and slowly made their way to the front steps. I didn't move to help. Inside, I sat on the couch with the lights off, laptop open. I didn't delete the email. I forwarded it to a friend I trusted with a single message. "Keep this, just in case." Then I opened a fresh document, started typing, just bullet points, names, dates, patterns. It wasn't anger anymore. It was evidence. This wasn't about revenge. This was about protection. People like them count on you being quiet, being decent, being too loyal to ever fight back. But loyalty isn't the same thing as silence. Sometimes it's knowing when to stop pretending you're not bleeding. And tonight, I stopped pretending. The plates had been cleared. Most of the other diners had filtered out. The soft music playing overhead was now louder than the conversation at our table, which had thinned into polite murmurs and shallow chuckles. I sat there, quiet, not cold, just still. Everyone else had a proper glass, water refilled, wine topped off. But when the server returned, he placed a single paper cup in front of me. Not another soul, just me. I didn't flinch, just looked down at it, then back up. My brother caught my eyes, gave a nervous smile like it was nothing. A mistake, maybe, but I wasn't born yesterday. That cup said more than words could. Someone made that choice, someone sent a message, and I got it, loud and clear. At the start of the dinner, I had placed a small photo album on the table, handmade, leather-bound. I stayed up 3 nights building it, years of family moments, care, laughter, losses, all of it. I'd set it gently beside my mother's fork, said nothing. Let it speak for itself. Now, it sat unopened, still in the same spot. Smudged dessert spoons, crumbs, wine rings, all around it like it was just part of the clutter. Lorelei glanced at it once, then muttered, "Oh, we'll look at it later." Later, that word again. The great American lie. I imagined her flipping through it weeks from now, laughing with her daughters, picking out the photos she liked, skipping the ones where I showed up, maybe even tossing the thing entirely once she scanned what she needed. I whispered to myself, you either write your own story or you get erased. I slipped my phone from my lap, screen dimmed low, and pulled up the image I'd taken earlier. The envelope. I zoomed in. The documents inside were clearer now. Copies, medical files, bank transfers, notes in handwriting that wasn't mine, but next to my name. They were editing me out, not just socially, legally. They weren't just shunning me. They were cleansing the record. Bit by bit. Quietly, professionally, I didn't breathe for a moment. Then I swiped the image away, slipped the phone back into my coat, and stood. "Restroom," I said softly. I walked out to the patio instead. Cool air hit my skin like a truth I couldn't ignore. A few seconds passed before I heard the door creak open behind me. Dad. He came out slowly, hands in his coat pockets. "Everything okay?" he asked, not looking me in the eye. I turned toward him, held my phone up, opened the image again. "This? You want to explain it?" He squinted, didn't reach for the phone, just stared at the screen. I don't know what that is." "You don't have to lie to me," I said. "Just tell me where I fit in this version of the family you're all rewriting." The silence that followed was like a slow suffocation. Lorelei pushed the door open behind him, her tone rehearsed. "You're misunderstanding. That's not how any of this is meant to look." "No?" I stepped forward. "Then show me where I belong. Show me how this isn't exactly what it looks like." Dad looked away. Lorelei folded her arms. I had my answer. I stood in that quiet for a moment, letting the sting rise and settle, letting the tears threaten and then pull back like a tide that refuses to crash. Finally, I looked at Dad, my voice barely above a whisper. You once called me your anchor. Now you won't even hold eye contact. His jaw clenched. No words. I turned from them both, walked back toward the door. Inside that building were people who had once been my family. Once. And maybe still were. But only on paper. Tonight wasn't about burning bridges. It was about seeing clearly. And what I saw was a house I'd helped hold together with my bare hands, brick by brick, while they all quietly drafted blueprints for a future I wasn't meant to be in. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. Because tonight, something broke, not in me, but in the lie we all pretended was still home. As I stepped back through the narrow hallway from the patio, the door hadn't fully closed behind me when I heard it, just a sliver of a whisper from a nearby table, like a scratch on old vinyl. She's always causing trouble. That was all. They didn't say my name. They didn't need to. My feet kept moving, but my stomach turned cold. A quiet kind of freeze that didn't melt even as the warm light of the restaurant touched my face again. I passed by the server station, walked by my brother's smirk, and sat down at my seat like nothing had happened. Inside, though, something had shifted. The table was quieter now. Forks pushed food half-heartedly, napkins folded, unfolded. Then, as if on cue, my brother raised his wine glass. To family, he said with a rehearsed grin, and making it through another year. Everyone followed suit. Clinks, smiles, even my mother forced a nod. I raised my glass too, held it just above the rim of my plate, and said quietly, "To truths we ignore." There was a pause, not long, just enough to make it uncomfortable. My father cleared his throat. Lorelei swirled her drink. My sister-in-law looked down. Funny, I continued, how some truths don't get told. They get revised. That stopped the show. No one moved. Even the background music seemed to dial down. My mother met my eyes. For the first time all night, really looked at me. And I could see it. Conflict. Not confusion. Just reluctance. That old maternal ache she carried but never let interfere with what's best for everyone. She didn't speak. None of them did. I let it hang there, like smoke that wouldn't clear. Then my phone buzzed. I checked it subtly beneath the table. Cress again. Another forwarded document. I excused myself once more and stepped back into the hallway. There it was, the latest draft of the family trust. The header had changed. And the language adjusted. My name no longer appeared in the primary clause. The allocation table had been altered. Lorelei's percentage had grown. Mine, reassigned. Silent, efficient. They were in the middle of finalizing it, which meant they thought I wouldn't notice until it was done. I stared at the screen, heart steady now. No panic, just a tight, clean rage that didn't scream. It just sharpened. Every smile at that table, every little dismissal, every, "oh, we'll talk later," suddenly took on new meaning. They weren't excluding me out of emotion. They were doing it legally, tactically, like I was an inconvenience to be managed. I returned, sat down, took a sip from my glass. It tasted like nothing. Then I looked across the table and asked calmly, "Are we editing stories tonight?" Lorelei blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You tell me," I replied. She gave a clipped laugh. "You're being dramatic." I reached into my bag and tapped the screen. I didn't wave the phone around, didn't make a scene. I just said, version 2.8, third revision, clause 4.1, my name gone. Your name added. That's not drama, that's detail. My brother shifted in his chair. "Can we not do this here?" "Oh, we're doing it now," I said, "because later is how people get erased." The tension coiled like a wire pulled tight. Even a guest 2 tables down paused mid-bite. "If anyone here wants to deny what's happening," I continued, "say it now. Otherwise, you all lose the benefit of pretending I didn't notice." No one answered. I reached for my glass again. My voice dropped. "I don't need your agreement. I don't need your approval. I have proof." Then I slid the phone toward my father. Not tossed, not shoved, just placed. He looked at it, didn't touch it, but I saw it in his face. He recognized the document, and he knew I'd gotten it before it was too late. The whole table shifted, like the furniture itself had heard enough lies. I leaned back, not angry, not broken, just done. And that kind of clarity, it scared them more than any shouting would have. I stared straight ahead. No one dared interrupt. This wasn't a request for justice. This was notice. After the tension around that dinner table, they tried to pivot, as if dessert and a playlist could patch over betrayal. Someone dimmed the lights. Someone else made a toast to new beginnings. Then came the slideshow, the family moments montage stitched together to soothe. I had asked them earlier, weeks ago, for a few minutes near the end. I had recorded a short video, no drama, just me speaking plainly, thanking my parents, honoring our messy history, and reminding them we all still had choices. Now, as the projector came to life, the screen blinked, flickered, and then, black. A pause. Then a voice from the tech table said flatly, "We're having trouble with that file." Something went wrong. I turned toward them. "Try again." Another flicker. A blank screen. Then a different video queued up. Lorelai's curated slideshow, her voice narrating over childhood photos. I didn't move. But inside, my chest knotted. They'd cut me off. Again. Eyes in the room shifted. Some glanced at me. Most didn't. My phone buzzed. I looked down. One line, from a number I didn't recognize. "You're not in it anymore." I held the screen up, silently. Let them see. A hush spread like smoke across the room. They didn't deny it. They didn't look surprised. They looked relieved, like something difficult had just been handled behind the scenes. I swallowed the rising sting. In that moment, I saw what they saw. Not their daughter or sister. Just an obstacle. A complication removed. I stood, slowly, deliberately. "This room is full of stories I once wrote," I said, voice steady. "Stories I lived. But you're erasing me from them." No one spoke. Lorelai broke the silence, her tone light, dismissive. "There you go again." I stepped closer to the table. "No, not again. This time I'm not asking. I'm showing." I placed the printouts, photos, and email threads on the table. Drafts of documents with dates, my original versions, their redline changes, the altered file, the playback timestamps. The projector light caught the edges of paper. Some guests leaned in. I looked directly at my father. "You think you're protecting something, but what you're doing, it's destruction, dressed as protection." My brother tried to reach across the table, maybe to calm, maybe to posture. I pulled my chair back before he touched me. "You control everything," I said, "except this moment. This, right now, is mine." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The power had shifted. Not because I had yelled, because I hadn't. My mother looked older than I remembered her being this morning. Her mouth moved slightly, but no words came. I could see her breaking in silence, not out of guilt, out of exposure. And me? I felt still. Not calm, but rooted. "This is the part," I said, "where I stop waiting for an apology." The room held its breath. I walked to the front of the room, picked up the remote, and shut off the screen. Silence. Then I turned to them all. "I'm done being the invisible woman in my own history." No one argued. No one stood. I pushed the table aside slightly, like clearing space to breathe. I stood alone, but taller. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my presence. Every file, every omission, every slight. It had led here. And now they knew. I wasn't fading. I was rising. And they would remember this night, not for what they did, but because I stood. I drove home with the windows halfway down. The coolness of the night air hit my skin, sharp and honest. No radio, just the sound of tires against pavement, and my own breath catching now and then when my chest clenched too tightly. I passed the old church on Main Street, still lit from the evening service, and the pharmacy where Mom used to buy candy just because. So many places, packed with stories I didn't write, or worse, let them write for me. But not anymore. By the time I turned into my driveway, the street was quiet. Porch lights glowing like soft reminders of lives going on. Mine included. I unlocked the door and stepped in. This wasn't the house I grew up in, but it was mine. A space where no one else dictated what got said or remembered. I didn't flick on every light. I didn't need to. I made my way to the spare room, the one I used to call storage, but had slowly turned into something of my own. Tonight, it became my place to start over. I laid everything out on the desk, the printed emails, the backup videos, the scribbled timelines, the notes I had kept in my phone for months. I powered up the old handheld recorder, not fancy, but dependable. I pressed record, and I spoke, not to argue, not to justify, just to tell it the way I remembered. The truth doesn't need to scream, I whispered. It just needs to exist. I took a breath, picked up one of the photos, the one they'd cropped me out of, and placed it beside the mic. This was the work now, reclaiming, not as an act of war, but of survival. I reached for a book I'd been holding onto for years, a worn copy of Toni Morrison's Beloved. The page I had dog-eared long ago still held her words. Freeing yourself was one thing, claiming ownership of that freed self was another. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just wrote, longhand, page after page, not to change their minds, but to find mine again. Somewhere around 3 a.m., my phone rang. I stared at the screen, not a parent, not Lorelei. It was Casey. "Hey," she said softly, almost like she didn't believe I'd pick up. "I saw what they did tonight." I said nothing, let her fill the space. "But I remember your voice," she added, more sure now. "I always did." We talked, really talked, for the first time since we were teenagers. She admitted she'd noticed things but was afraid to speak, that others in the family had questions, but no one wanted to be the one to start something. I told her, silence is a story too, but I'm done letting it be mine. The line was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "I'm glad you're saying it out loud." After we hung up, I stayed sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes and paper and pieces of a history I was finally claiming. I wasn't fueled by rage anymore. That had burned through. What stayed was something firmer, clearer. I organized everything by date, labeled folders, drafted blog titles. The first post had already been typed earlier that week, sitting in my drafts, waiting for the moment I was ready. I clicked publish. Its title read, "Not Erased, A Daughter's Retelling." By dawn, a few comments had come in. People I didn't know, saying thank you, saying they'd felt invisible too. I didn't reply to any of them. Not yet. Just read each one slowly, like someone tracing their fingers along a scar. The sun started to rise. I pulled the blinds up fully this time. Let the morning pour in without filter. It wasn't a new beginning. It was just a morning, but I smiled anyway. I made coffee. No rush, no noise. My hands steady. The kitchen silent, but not empty. I knew the phone might not ring again. Not from my parents, not from my brother, and that was fine. I wasn't waiting anymore.